Welcome, everyone. U.S. President Donald Trump and his government are undertaking a widespread visa review process, revoking hundreds of visas and placing hundreds more under scrutiny, targeting mostly foreign nationals engaged in pro-Palestine activism. Secretary of State Marco Rubio confirmed the scale of the crackdown, announcing that he's canceled visas for more than 300 people that he called lunatics connected to campus pro-Palestine protests throughout America. This controversial campaign flies directly in the face of America's constitutional guarantees. Arrests, detentions, and deportations of young women and men speaking out against genocide and ethnic cleansing by U.S. authorities is the focus of this edition of your Press TV Spotlight program. And now for our guests. Joining us, Mr. Daniel Kovalik, author and activist, joining us out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in the U.S. And Mr. Paul Larudee, former U.S. government advisor, joining us out of Berkeley, California, also in the States. Gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you both to the program. I guess, Daniel, we'll start with you out there in Pittsburgh. Now, why does a young Turkish-born PhD student, Daniel, have to be treated like a criminal, arrested, accosted by U.S. authorities in broad daylight by masked men, undercover agents, for writing an op-ed in her university school paper asking Tufts University to cut ties with Israel? Daniel, her name, Rumeysa Öztürk, 30 years old, PhD student. Now, these are people usually, Daniel, we celebrate in humanity, not ostracize and incarcerate. What is going on?
Yeah, well, it is, insane that, the U.S., which purports to be a bastion of free speech and democracy, is treating its guests like this, and these are people from other countries who have a right to be here, a legal right. And by the way, they have a First Amendment right to free speech under the Constitution. Some of the Bill of Rights are written in a way that they only protect citizens, but not the First Amendment. It protects everyone in the United States, even green card holders or other visa holders. So what's being done is unconstitutional, but it's also just wrong. I mean, what kind of message does it send to the rest of the world that we would treat, young scholars, young students this way? And they're not just being deported, they're being basically kidnapped and sent to undisclosed locations. They can't communicate with people. It really is shameful. I've never seen anything like it, actually, in my lifetime.
Thank you, Daniel. And Paul, welcome to the conversation here in our Spotlight program. Good to have you. Paul, earlier in the month, this all kicked off, you very well remember, with Mahmoud Khalil's case, creating international uproar. A Ivy League student, Columbia University, a renowned top university in the States. You can imagine what kind of kids attend this esteemed institution. One of the brilliant minds, I should say, of our world. His wife, an American citizen. The Trump administration revoked his green card for what they called anti-Semitic support for Hamas. So how does, Paul, anti-genocide, anti-apartheid, anti-ethnic cleansing, anti-occupation somehow make you an enemy of the Jewish people, a racist, a bigot?
It doesn't matter if you're an enemy of the Jewish people. Not to say that he is. I have no indication that he's an enemy, I know very few people who are enemies of the Jewish people. But the point is, we have free speech in this country, and you're entitled to speak against Jewish people or Christian people or Muslim people, or you're entitled to be a bigot in this country. This is not, it's not illegal to be deluded and nasty and all of these sort of things. But he's not. It doesn't matter. The point is to paint him as an enemy of Israel and of the United States. And besides, what country are we in? Are we in Israel or are we in the United States? And it's plain to me to see that we're graduating, we're moving towards a country that is run by Zionism. You can see it everywhere in all the policies that we have. So, where is Zionism in the Constitution of the United States? Where is it in the international law? And I don't remember Zionism being part of Judaism until the 19th century either. This is nonsense. These people have the right to their opinion, but they do not have the right to cause other people to lose their rights and privileges, and they do not have the right to enforce their ideas to the detriment, including the mortal detriment of the Palestinian people or anyone else. It's as simple as that.
And Daniel, another student here, Badar Khan Suri, a Georgetown scholar from India, his wife also an American citizen. Now, the U.S., you very well know, has made quite a fuss about a dual U.S.-Israeli nationals that are being held captive in Gaza. So where is that protection for spouses of American citizens? Please tell me that religion, Daniel, is not a part of the reason these young boys and girls are being targeted.
Well, I don't think it's really religion. I agree with Paul that, this is about Zionism, which, I suppose it's a religion of sorts, but it's not, a true part of Judaism. And that's what really this is about. It's about, well, there's a few things happening here. I mean, in essence, this is about protecting U.S. policy towards Israel. It's about defending the genocide that's happening in Gaza right now. I just read from Haaretz, which is an Israeli newspaper, that in one evening, Israel killed 300 Palestinians in Gaza. I mean, it's just extraordinary. And the U.S. cannot defend this. And so it has to crack down on people who raise this issue. And so what this is about is going after people they think they can legally go after. Again, I don't think they can under the First Amendment, but it's certainly easier to go after visa holders rather than citizens. And they're doing this in order to chill dissent, to send a message to people that if you speak out for Palestine, even if you're a Palestinian, by the way, you will be punished. And what a lot of people are predicting, and I predicted myself, is they're going to first come for the visa holders, and then they're going to come for citizens. They will start doing this to U.S. citizens, right? Especially when they try to come back into the country from travel. So this is a slippery slope, and it's quite concerning.
It's interesting you brought that up, because that was going to be one of my questions, that once they've exhausted going after, because we know these thousands upon thousands of protests over the last 16, 17 months now, that they've involved more than just immigrants, the majority being U.S. citizens on these college campuses. So what are they going to do when they exhaust going after immigrants? But we'll get to that. Yoon So Chang, Paul, young Korean-born lady. As a matter of fact, her entire life, beyond 6 years old, she was in the States. Also a Columbia University student. Now her arrest for protesting the college expulsion of pro-Palestinian activists and students. The U.S. First Amendment, Paul, and to Daniel and yours point, not the second, not the third, but First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution gives you the right, free assembly, free speech, religion, and press. So why is the U.S. willing, Paul, to throw all of this out for the Israeli regime, targeting kids and gifted kids at that, Paul, standing for humanity for a regime that cares little about it?
Well, that's it. If you want to have a regime that cares little about it, then you have to silence the voices of those who don't agree with you. This is becoming a police state here. In fact, it has been becoming a police state for a very long time. And just to the point of the threat to American citizens, I might point out that when I was flying back from Europe, after visiting Palestine and the Middle East some years ago, I was stopped in Canada by the United States Immigration and Customs. And They kept me out of the United States overnight. But finally, I had to say to them that, I'm sorry, I'm an American citizen. I'm not a Canadian citizen. I didn't apply for immigration to Canada, and I don't think Canada is of a mind to accept me as a citizen. So you have no choice. You have to accept me back. You have no place else to send me. So, but it started years ago, and it's only going to get worse if we sit back and accept it. What we have to do is to resist our oppression here in the United States to the same extent that Palestinians are resisting their oppression in Palestine. We have to do this. The demonstrations are forbidden, but we have to go beyond demonstrations.
And thanks, Paul. And the thing, Daniel, here, you've spent decades giving political cover to a regime that has grossly, hundreds of times, violated international law, but allowing this regime, giving it cover to, violate your own constitution for the Israeli entity. It seems much more personal. Not a lot of U.S. leadership seemingly would go this far. Why is this cabinet, or do you see other cabinets doing the same thing? Because we haven't seen it to this extent. We've seen the anti-Semitic label tagged on a lot of people over the decades for siding with Palestinians, but this kind of action, gross action to attack and deport college students, even with federal judges giving them waivers, and you're still going to violate the waiver and put the kid up for deportation. Why would you do this for Israel?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to money. The AIPAC, the Israeli lobbying firm, gives millions and millions of dollars to candidates. Trump himself received, I think $100 million or something from a well-known Zionist. So a lot of it is money, but it's not just that. I mean, the truth is, if you support a genocide like the one in Gaza with billions of dollars of armaments, if you're supporting that kind of unrestrained violence, of course that violence will come home. Of course, if you're willing to do that to babies in Gaza, ultimately you will be willing to do that to your own citizens. And that's what we're seeing. And frankly, when you look at American history, the worst crackdowns on civil rights have always come in support of war, right? The ones I can think of are the First World War, where they were arresting people, very prominent people like Eugene V. Debs for speaking out against the war. Of course, in World War II, you had the internment of the Japanese. When a country like the U.S. fights an unpopular war, and this war in Gaza is very unpopular, they end up turning to repression to defend that war.
And Paul, these college campus protests, highly organized, highly peaceful, a strong display of what young Americans and future Americans, especially the educated, want their country to stand for, be part of, or not be a part of. How's the message here not exactly what you would want from young minds in a democracy? If you really stand as the U.S. for what you claim to stand for, how do you justify attacking the messenger in this instance?
Well, you answered the question yourself. That this would your assertion would be true in a democracy, and that's exactly what we're losing here. We're in the process of losing a democracy, and we're pretty far down the road, if you ask me. And we're going farther. I have the impression that most countries of the world have more democracy than we do right now. So yes, human rights are being thrown in the trash barrel because the system in the United States rewards those who can get them enough money to get themselves elected, and that is the main game of the Israel, the Zionist lobby in the United States, which uses vast amounts of the money of the arms producers in this country, and it assigns essentially at least one, usually two, and maybe more, to every member of Congress to stay in Washington full time, to pressure them and to advise them and to make sure that as long as they are doing the bidding of Israel, then they will be reelected, and if they don't, then they will arrange for the opposition candidate to win the next election. This is how it operates here. You can hardly, if you're in Congress, you can hardly speak out at all, and they don't. And if you're not in Congress, it seems we're going in the same direction. We're not going to be allowed to speak out.
And Daniel, I want to get into the justification U.S. authorities are using to go after, detain, and try to revoke the visas, the revocation and the deportation of these young students. Here's the justification the U.S. authorities are using. They're saying that support for Palestinians is support for Hamas. And since we as the U.S. have designated Hamas as a terrorist organization, then support for Palestinians equates to support for terrorism. Now, this conflating, you very well know, it is not sound, it's not logical, it's not rational, it is not a valid argument. In fact, Daniel, it is a fallacy. It is false reasoning, as any logician would tell you. So how sad and pathetic is this stretch that U.S. authorities cannot come up with a more consistent, a more plausible, a better position to crack down on these young students?
Well, first of all, it has to be said that these anti-terrorism laws are used quite often as an end around free speech protections, right? Because they want to claim that anything you do, for example, in the case of defending Palestine, is somehow material support to Hamas, which, by the way, is absurd. I have a First Amendment right to say I support Hamas. That is not material support to them. Now, if I somehow coordinate my message with Hamas, that may be different. But in any case, just saying you support them, you have a First Amendment right to do that. But again, most of the people that are protesting are not doing it in support of Hamas. They're doing it in support of the Palestinian people. So yes, to bootstrap it that way is very disingenuous. But again, once you get it into the terms of fighting terrorism, then a lot can be allowed to do. And that was the danger of passing this terrorist legislation after 9/11, the Patriot Act, for example, because it opened the door to repressing dissent and free speech, and that's exactly what you're seeing right now.
And Paul, can I get your take on the same failed pretext and argument to justify this crackdown?
Well, if the justification is that it gives support to Hamas, what's wrong with that? Hamas is fighting the same fight that other freedom fighters have fought around the world. What are they fighting for? They're fighting for independence, for sovereignty for Palestine, for freedom to live freely in their own country. At least they want at least as much as what Israel has. In fact, they don't want it just for them. They want it for the people of Israel too. They would like to have a country where you can have different opinions, including the Zionists themselves, as long as you're not abrogating the rights of other people. What is wrong with this? Have you seen the way Hamas is treating the Israeli captives that they had? You can argue with the question of taking civilian captives, but in terms of the treatment, they have been kind and civil. Compare that with the way the Palestinians are treated. The Palestinian prisoners are treated. The abuse, the torture, the rape, the death of them. I mean, I would take Hamas any day, and I will fly a Hamas flag on the street. I hope Hamas will come and liberate the United States, because the way we're going. But it doesn't have to be Hamas. We can liberate ourselves.
But more concerning here, what I'm trying to get at, and Daniel, help me out here, is that we've documented the most vile and extremist elements, both in Israeli society and these far-right settlers, the kind of rhetoric we hear from them, and also from the social the political apparatus there. In the current cabinet, you hear these people basically calling all Palestinians terrorists, justifying the genocide, the ethnic cleansing, saying that there is no such thing as an innocent Palestinians. You heard of one of them justifying dropping a nuclear bomb on Gaza. Today, how concerned should we be that that very same voice and position is basically resonating with U.S. leadership in the White House and this cabinet?
Well, it certainly is resonating, and you will hear U.S. leaders in the executive branch in the Congress say things exactly like that. Talk about the Palestinians as if all of them are terrorists from the age of 1 day to 100, which, by the way, is genocidal talk, because obviously that is dehumanizing an entire population and saying an entire population is a legitimate military target. But the other thing that happens is when you dehumanize the other and you commit horrible atrocities against the other, like murder, rape, etc., that Paul was discussing, then you cross a line, and once that line is crossed, you're willing to do that to, people of your own nationality and ethnicity. And that's happening in Israel, right? They're raping people, abusing people, first the Palestinians, but now you're seeing Israelis being raped by other Israelis. You see female soldiers being raped by Israeli soldiers. And again, when the U.S. supports those types of atrocities abroad, it doesn't take much to imagine that they're on their way to doing those sorts of atrocities against their own people.
And Paul, I think we have just about enough time for about one more question. Let me put it to you, Paul. Dr. Rasha Aliway, a kidney transplant specialist from Lebanon who previously worked and lived in Rhode Island, was deported this month for saying she supports and followed spiritual teachings of martyr Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah of Hezbollah. An Iranian-born Alireza Durudi, a PhD student in mechanical engineering, both of them deported, both given waivers by a federal judge not to be deported otherwise, still. And to unjustly, Paul, demonize, target, suppress, reprimand without due process or legal protections, and use the military to achieve that objective, to that end, is this not a blueprint in any society for fascism?
Exactly. However you define fascism, I think this qualifies, and it's meant, all of these acts are meant to suppress free speech in the society. It's meant to intimidate the rest of society. Right now, they're intimidating people who are here legally, doing legal things while they're here. So what does that say about those who are not foreigners, who are U.S. citizens? It means that you are next. And they will argue, as they did in World War II, for example, that people of a given extraction, maybe Arab extraction, Muslim people, in World War II, it was the Japanese. And they argue that these are not real Americans. They have family relations with people amongst our enemy, and therefore they have to be held in concentration camps. It's not going to end with with visitors who are here, or even with immigrants who are not yet citizens. It's going to end with citizens themselves. And in fact, if you ask me, there are cases where citizens are being incarcerated and who are losing their careers and losing their rights in this society already, long before they end up being in prison or somehow deported to where, I don't know, because they're not necessarily citizens of other countries, maybe to Guantanamo.
Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us on the program, and stay safe to both of you there. Mr. Daniel Kovalik, their author and activist, joining us from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Paul Larudee, a former U.S. government advisor, joining us out of Berkeley, California, both from the States. And this brings us to the end.